Welcome back to the Nuances podcast. I'm your host Lazu, and I hope you're having a wonderful holiday week if you celebrate. If not, I hope you get some rest at the very least as we wind down 2024. Last week I told you that my next release will be for you if you're not into the festive vibe but would rather hear something spooky. Well, I am here to deliver on that promise with our latest feed drop. Today, I'd love to introduce you to the podcast That Scares Me Too by Fool and Scholar. In it, Dr. Sophie Yang and K.A. Statz discuss myths and tales of horror from Taiwan and Asia. Together, they compare and contrast stories from their cultures and talk about the shared humanity that is fear. In this episode, we're introduced to unknown entities in the mountains of Taiwan. Enjoy.
First, I'm going to tell you a couple of scary stories, and then we're going to dive deeper into the discussion. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Sophie Yang.
And I am K.A. Statz.
This is That Scares Me Too. We are about to present to you, listeners, a series of creepy horror stories from Taiwan and Asia, and I, Dr. Sophie Yang, will try my best to scare my co-host, K.A. Statz, and see how she responds to all my creepy tales.
And I am looking forward to it. I am here with, of course, the wonderful Sophie that I have worked with for a few years on other horror stories. And today we are diving into some from Asia that hopefully will make my hair stand on end. So, what do you have for us today?
We're talking about unknown entities in the mountains in Taiwan. According to Taipei Times, every single year there are about 800 people that go missing. About 70% of Taiwan is covered in densely forested mountains. So, Caitlin, when we think about going into the mountains, we think about hiking, we think about enjoyable activities with our friends and families. And then we also think about family-friendly stuff, such as the cartoon My Neighbor Totoro. I wonder if you've seen it before.
I have. I grew up watching a lot of Miyazaki films.
Nice. So, today I will also be talking about the wonderful but creepy and scary, sometimes deadly mountain spirits in Taiwan. That is not as friendly as My Neighbor Totoro. In Taiwan, we have an unknown entity that is so popular still till today. Every single time you think about going into the mountains, every single elder will always tell you this, is that when you look at the mountains, you will sometimes find yourself lost in the mist because Taiwan's geography, the mountains are very, very weirdly oriented. Sometimes you find yourself getting lost or disoriented, and it's very common. So in Taiwan, we have about 70% densely forested mountains, and we have often hikers getting lost in the mountains. Oftentimes when you feel like you are lost, you think that you can just head back where you came from. Just go back the direction you came up. But the tricky part about Taiwanese mountains is because it is so steep and the climate and the weather changes so swiftly. Sometimes mist will come, sometimes rain will come, and it changes the atmosphere, it changes the lighting, it changes the whole perception of direction, completely different from what it was before. Okay, so it is always ill-advised for any travelers, any hikers to go back the way you come from when you are feeling lost. If you choose to do so, oftentimes you'll find yourself getting lost again because you are not going back on the same path you were. You think you are, but you are not. Getting lost again, and worst of all, losing their lives because they chose to go back. Don't panic, okay? You just stay in your place and try to figure out your own direction. The scary part isn't getting lost, though, Caitlin. The scary part is that when you are in a panic, you see somebody waving to you. What is the immediate reaction you're going to have? You see somebody in a flashing red or yellow rain jacket, and you see that person standing really kind of a distance away from you, but they're waving at you, beckoning you to come to them when you are lost. What is your immediate reaction, Caitlin?
As a tiny woman, sometimes it's discerning whether or not they look malevolent. But if you're lost and you think you found someone for the first time in a while and maybe they know the way back, then you would start walking towards them, maybe waving.
Yes, exactly. And note that they are wearing something that's like flashy and very observant to the eye. So the immediate assumption is that maybe there's somebody who's come here to rescue you, or like mountain rangers, somebody who is familiar to the terrain. Why else would they be here? And at the moment where you need help the most. So most people will often go to these entities. And the thing is, you talked about if they look benevolent. The key here is that you can't see their faces because they just happen to stand at a distance where you can't see their expression. You don't know if they're smiling. You don't know if they're frowning, but they're just beckoning you. Now, you walk towards them, Caitlin. You want to see what's up, but oftentimes, these survivors who come back and tell the tale, they find themselves in a flash as they're walking towards them. Blink of an eye, the person disappears. And where do they find themselves? Almost stepping off a cliff. These entities, which is called the gotchuuuuuuu. The gotchuuuuuuu means the shapeless entities. We're guiding these people who are lost to their demise. So, elderlies, your grandpa, your grandmas in Taiwan would often warn and heed their warning, you must, do not follow strangers. This is the first introduction into the shapeless entity of gotchuuuuuuu. Follow the waters. You often hear that or see that in movies. Just follow the water will guide you out because they always go back to the sea, right? Ill-advised option for Taiwanese hikers because Taiwanese mountains do not work that way. If you choose to follow the rivers or streams you came across in the mountains, it will lead you to a cliff or a dead end again. So, when you get lost, stay in one place. Do not move. Wait for help however you can. Subsequently, I am going to tell you another story that is related to this shapeless entity, gotchuuuuuuu. Once, there was a little boy. One time, he went into the mountains with his family. He was with a group on a tour, hiking. He mentioned that this was not even high or deep into the woods of the mountain here in Taiwan. He did not mention which mountain it is for obvious reasons because he does not want people to taint the name, the reputation of the mountains or the national parks that we have because that was his own personal experience. He only shared it because of that's just what happened to him. And he felt like it was just memorable. It left a print in his mind. Suddenly he found a snake. So little boy, He saw a snake and he was like, oh my God, there was a snake. And he was very scared and he didn't know what to do. And the snake just shuffled away, minding his own business. The little boy turned around and found that the entire tour group completely went off on their direction. So he hurried to catch up. Despite his effort, his little legs couldn't keep up with the tour group. And he saw there was a family ahead of him. Okay, there's a family of 4. There's a father, mother, and a sibling of sister and brother. They're all older than him. This boy is about 8 or 9 years old, he recalled. So he catches up to the family, thinking that this family is in the same tour group as they were. And he asked the father of the group, are we heading up towards the mountain top together? The father of the group said nothing and didn't even turn around or face the little boy. None of them did, but they just kept on walking faster and faster, but just waving towards the little boy, beckoning gesture like, keep up with us. The little boy cannot see his own family anywhere in sight, so he has no other choice but to choose to keep up with this group that seems to know their own direction. So he kept up with them. When you see there's a path, that means that there's a cleared pathway for you to walk on. There's usually less rocks, less pebbles, and less grass that's taller than human beings, where your perception of sight is able to reach the other end of the horizon. What happens next is very weird to this little boy, despite his young age, is that this group of family did not stay on the main track. Instead, they went off on a grass-filled track. This is not the main track where there's no grass. They went off on a side path where it's filled with grass. And the little boy kept asking little questions. You know how little boys are. They just can't stop asking questions. Where are we going? Are we heading up to the mountaintop? Can I see my dad? And the dad and the mom still refuses to turn around and show their faces to the little boy, but instead just keep on gesturing towards the little boy to keep on following them. And he looks at the siblings, who's also older than him, somehow seemingly agitated, squirming as if they're uncomfortable. But all of them, the 4 of them, taller than he was, just refuses to turn around to face him, to look at him, to even acknowledge him. So he just couldn't see their expressions on their faces to gauge whether or not he should follow them. But he has no other choice. So a few steps more they take onto the grass path. And he cannot help but feeling that he's just getting more lost. So he keeps on asking and asking, but he refuses to keep walking along with them. The dad started huffing and puffing and sighing and keeps on having this long sighs of being disgruntled and being dissatisfied. It's, come on. And he feels this agitation from the entire group. And the mom of the group stops when she senses that the little boy didn't want to catch up. She stops, but still doesn't turn around, standing in place, and that's when the little boy feels something is wrong. He felt scared a little while ago when he saw that snake. He felt scared when he felt like this snake could bite me. But there was no amount of fear that can compare to what he's feeling right now. This family of 4 that refuses to turn around to face him no matter what. So he turns around. He doesn't know where he was. He's lost in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing to be seen but grass, and he's very short, but he just runs the other direction. And somehow he's back on the main track. The first person he sees was his uncle. His uncle says, "We've been trying to look for you for 3 hours. Where were you? Why couldn't you just stay in one place?" The little boy answers meekly. He says, I don't know. I saw a snake and I was scared by the snake. And then I saw a group of family that I thought that was in our group. The uncle said, "No, it was just us. This is a family trip. Did you forget? There were no other people. You're not supposed to follow strangers." And the little boy looked back on the grass hidden path. There was nobody there. And he just cannot forget how disgruntled, how dissatisfied, and all the sighs that father made. Till this day, this person who told the story still doesn't know what would happen to him had he followed along with his family. When you get lost, stay in one place. Do not move. Wait for help however you can. The mountains in Taiwan are very steep. You have grasses that are taller than your waist. So you need to make sure that each step you take don't have snakes hidden within the grass. So this is what you need to be mindful of when you're hiking up in the mountains. Stay on the grass-cleared paths. As you hike, you will find yourself trying to figure out a way to proceed, to go up to the mountaintop, to where your destination is. So you will look for markers such as, are there less stones on this path? Less grass on this path? If there's any sign of grass being pulled out, that's a man-made effort. That means that this is a path that you can walk on. This is a path that somebody else has walked on before.
In Germany or even in the US, certain trees will have paint put on them so that people can know that this is the red path. We're going to walk the red path today. Do they have ways of denoting it in Taiwan as well?
Yes, we have certain paths that are very well established. We even have maps for tourists to take on when they venture into these national parks. And these are the safer toddler's route. That's what we call them, the toddler's route, when you just want to have a taste of what it feels like to be in the subtropical national parks, where you basically just travel at the very bottom of the mountains. But again, Taiwanese mountains are very steep. So if you do want to get to a higher ground, a higher plane where you get to see, where you get to invite in a greater plane, a greater view of the landscape, you want to, of course, climb higher up into the mountains. You always want to climb higher up. It gets a lot steeper than most would expect. I myself have actually never ever tried to do so because I'm a scaredy cat in real life. I don't really often want to hike the mountains. I would go to a forest in a heartbeat, but to hike Taiwanese mountains, it takes a lot of courage. My dad told me he used to have a friend who was in the hiking club. And once he went to hike by himself in the 60s or 70s. It was in the national news that time when he went hiking himself and didn't come back to report back to the barracks. He was in the army back then. And so it made national news. But when he came back, he said that he saw 4 army rangers' bodies still frozen in place, because they were also people who have hiked before and lost their life. And my dad told me this is because Army Rangers in our society are supposed to be the best physically, with the best physique, the best mentality, with the best stamina to go hiking up the mountains. But they were underprepared. They did not pack hiking gear or anything. So they unfortunately lost their lives. And because the mountains was so steep, not many people dare to venture that path again to even retrieve their bodies. So this guy, my dad knew from the army, this guy went hiking by himself, came back to live and tell the tale, told my dad that he caught glimpses of the 4 bodies who have unfortunately passed away in the mountains of Taiwanese national parks.
It falls in line with what you were saying for your story, this idea of a child. So most people won't take a family with small children on an incredibly strenuous mountain climb hike. They're usually very calm paths, very steady paths through the mountains. And then things are trying to lure you into the far more dangerous yet beautiful parts of the Taiwanese mountainside.
Yeah, oftentimes actually Taiwanese families would just go to the gentle slopes. We have gentle slopes too. This is where the misconception, it will like lure you in, give you this misconception like, oh, it's such a gentle slope. Let's climb up higher. But no.
We have search and rescue stories, but they're less horror of the supernatural kind and more horror of the normal human kind, like the people going up onto the mountain and freezing because they don't know that even though it might be spring and it feels warm down in the valley, it still freezes very deep at night up in the mountains. So you were saying that the elders, the grandmothers and grandfathers in Taiwan will tell people not to follow these beckoning creatures or these beckoning forms. And for both of them, you said that you never get close enough to see their faces. Is there any reasoning that you know of behind why you don't get to see their faces?
When it comes to the shapeless entity, and I think this sets it apart from other entities that we've heard from the West that you cannot explain. There's no expression on their faces. I think it's because if you can see human faces, and I know there's a word for it, but I just can't think of it right now, where you can see human faces in objects. I think it was done on purpose by these entities so that you would be able to let your guard down and approach them. If you see that it's smiling, then it's still kind of creepy. But if you look somber or if you're frowning, then what else could it mean? Are you frustrated to see me here, that I'm lost? I'm already lost. Why are you angry at me for being lost? Like, neither of those expressions really can make sense. Now, the second part about the bright yellow and bright red poncho. According to those who have seen them, I think they're trying to justify for being lost and following unknown entities, because for us Taiwanese people, we would kind of want to make fun of them. Like, I know you're lost and feeling very panicked, but why are you still following a person that you do not know under such circumstances? And the person will often say that it's because they're wearing something that's very flashy, very observant to the eye. And for somebody to have the cognizance, to have the sentience to wear something so bright signifies that maybe they're part of a rescue team.
So this story with the family is a singular story. You said specifically this was a boy who survived and he grew up and he told his story. The ones with the brightly colored jackets, the ones that are beckoning individuals forward, is there a large collection of people or that have seen or encountered this? There has to be if the grandparents are telling people to beware when they go out into the mountains.
Yes, there are a collection, tidbits here and there that you can see even today on the news in newspapers where you see like grandmas surviving. It's kind of like small town America. The entirety of Taiwan is very small. So when people go missing, you can anywhere in Taiwan, any part of Taiwan, you go missing, you report it to the authorities. You can often find them within like 2 or 3 days. Even if it's a teenager wanting to skip town, you can't skip town. you always get found, and either way, it's impossible to stay hidden. Oftentimes we'll have our elderly parents or our grandfathers or grandmothers having dementia or losing their memory of how to get home, right? It's very common for older people. You find your grandparent getting lost for over 6 days. How are they going to survive for over 6 days. And a lot of times these grandparents, these seniors are lost when they live very close to the mountains. So you report that not only to the authorities, but also notify the national parks. We also send in helicopter to find a bird's eye view of the entire landscape. Search or rescue or retrieval. That's only 2 options, right? We've listened to so many of those stories. And we often hear grandma saying that, oh, I've been lost for 6 days, but I just followed someone and they fed me berries and they gave me drinking water. Because we know human body can sustain without food for over 7 days, but no water, you die. And the grandma relayed her experience that there was somebody or something giving her drinking water.
So most of the stories that I can think of that compare would be the creepypasta origination of these search and rescue stories in the US. Then you have these, I think it's called the Bear Man and the Fuzzy Man. And these are entities that children saw. At the very beginning, you asked me about Totoro. And in Totoro, the only people who can see Totoro are the 2 little girls. It's only the children because they have this natural innocence that can interact with the more benevolent natural spirits, be it the bear man, the fuzzy man, or some unseen entity like you've seen here. Would you say that it's only elderly people who are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's that are commonly seeing this, or is it also the elderly who have the full reign of their faculties?
Fully capable elderlies have also reported seeing these kind of people. They thought that they were people at the time. And that's the scary part, is that when they come back and they try to explain it to their grandchildren, to their own children, saying that, oh, you don't have to be worried, sons, granddaughters, you don't have to be worried. I was in the company of somebody who's very nice. And the more they try to describe it, the less humanly they sound. There are no more words to describe it. But somehow they come out unharmed. And it's always in the mountains. And I don't know why.
You had a name earlier for these malevolent ones that were ushering people to cliffs or to dangerous slides. Is there a different name for the ones that are assisting people, that are aiding people, or are they all grouped together under this idea of an unknown entity?
They are all grouped together under this entity called 보싱아. And when you encounter something that you cannot explain, your grandfather or your grandmother will just stop you and say, like, okay, stop talking. Let's not talk about it anymore. It's just the 보싱아. It's just the 보싱아. Just stop talking. No more. No more. Don't talk about it. Don't acknowledge it. I don't know how is it in the West to not speak of the devil, but in our culture, it is kind of a thing where we try not to acknowledge it. He who shall not be named, kind of like Voldemort. We just move on. We just carry on with our lives and we try not to disturb them. When they have full power, when they are the most potent, it will be in the mountains. Just like in Totoro, when you see Totoro appears, it's always in the mountains. Like, it's always when they get to have the full force. And that's why I mentioned to you, have you ever think about this before? Have you ever wondered about this before? Even in the storyline, the father introducing their daughters to their new house, to their new home in the mountains, he talks about how, oh, you should respect the mountain spirits. There will be mountain spirits for you to wonder about, to use your imagination to discover and explore. I feel like the father probably already heard of some kind of myths, lores, and legends regarding mountain spirits in Japan, because it's also part of their lores too. In the mountains, there are certain spirits and deities that you need to pay respect to.
this idea of a forest spirit is prevalent in a lot of Miyazaki's works. And I know that in Totoro, there's a very large tree. I don't know what kind of tree, but the tree has been considered sacred, and it has a rope bound around it that marks it as a sacred tree and possibly as where Totoro's main spirit resides. And for me, it's interesting going back and thinking to not only what you said about the Taiwanese mountains and how quickly the weather can change and how quickly the depth and the sheer faces of the mountain can change, but also that a forest itself is, even without mountains, very flat forest is in itself an incredibly scary place filled with the ability, not even counting things like snakes or creatures that can harm you, but the forest itself is almost by design a maze that if someone's there doesn't know how to navigate it. Because if you think of Totoro or if you think of Boshinga, this idea that nature, because you're saying they're most powerful when they're in the mountains, that nature itself may not be entirely malevolent or benevolent. It's not always going to lead you to a cliff, and it's not always going to feed you berries. It's just nature. And nature, at least from the Western perspective, doesn't really care about you as a person.
It's deep-seated in our religious belief, too, that the nature itself has its own rules and laws, like a bigger blueprint, if you will. So it does not care about your small little worries, your small little loves, your small little romances. It has its bigger design. So it's not that it's uncaring, it's more so it has its own design. And we're merely ants in the ant maze that it's created. So we have to follow its design. So we want to be mindful about it. And why is it that Japanese mountain gods are just like more nice and Taiwanese mountain spirits are just like more evil or more mischievous? Because even with all my research and like growing up, interacting and engaging with Japanese friends or like Japanese culture and stuff, they've always respected their woods. They've always think of their woods and the mountains. The Fuji mountain is the spirit of their nation, right? Fuji mountain is the spirit of their nation. So they've always respected it, held it in such high regard. I don't know if it's because Taiwanese people have not paid in such high regard to our own mountains. So the mountain spirits are just like, let me show you what I can do. I'm going to punish you, all you little ants right now. So like,
You're saying the Taiwanese mountain spirits are spiteful?
yes, a little bit. Like, let me show you. I'm going to teach you a lesson now, you people. Maybe this is a warning sign. Maybe today, Dr. Sophie Yang and Kay Statz finally figure out a way to counter the Boshinga is that, we should pay it the respect it's due.
Perhaps.
But
these were, again, it's so interesting to see, or I guess to hear, that there's so many similarities between these kinds of spirits and what it is that they're luring or doing to these mountain hikers, these people just looking to have a fun time in the mountains who end up having instead probably the most memorable and terrifying experience of their life. And
yes,
thank you. I would say on the scale of scaring me, on a 1 to 10, I would say this one's like a 4 because I listen to so many search and rescue stories.
No problem.
And I live very close to the mountains. The mountains near me are also very, very steep. We live in a valley. And we have access to this kind of stories all the time. One of our friends is a search and rescue worker.
Wow.
And again, no supernatural stories there, just stories of people who underestimate what it takes to climb a mountain.
It is very sad.
And I think the great thing is the stories that you're saying have so many similarities that are both the similarities in the supernatural and the similarities of being a human being who wants to travel the mountains and doesn't understand the power and beauty and danger of the natural world.
a secret collection of mine. Whenever I get little tidbits here and there, I have like a secret folder tucked away. I just collect all the tidbits I have about Boxing'an, and I just feel like the emotional part of me is that whenever I hear a young life, because recently we just had another college student came from one of our top universities who went hiking by himself, who passed away tragically in the mountains due to the exposure to the elements. It's a subtropical country, and you can still be, get hypothermia and freeze to death, but I just can't help but feel like, what was he experiencing in those last moments, and is it related to the Boxing'an? What got to him in those final moments? And I feel this is kind of a way of honoring them to those who have passed, is to feel what they have gone through, my community, my people, what they have gone through. So it's always been very fascinating, but also a very personal topic for me, the Boxing'an topic.
If you have your own stories about some strange entities in the woods or the mountains near you, you can email us these stories at thatscaresmetoo@gmail.com. We look forward to finding out what other places around the world share these kinds of tales. Thank you all for listening. I am K.A. Statz. And thank you to our primary host, Dr. Sophie Yang, for sharing these stories today.
Stay tuned next time, everyone, when we talk about the Grim Reaper in Taiwan.